Hi everyone, welcome to today's Q&A session. We are joined today by Max, who is the CEO of B-Side Games. I'm Adrian and I'm also accompanied by Piara. We are both community leads at Flow. In this session, we will be diving into a number of exciting topics, including what it takes to launch a blockchain game, how Max got involved with blockchain, and all about the upcoming highly anticipated Chainmonsters game, which we're very excited to learn more about. Before we dive right in, just to let you know, we'll be leaving some time at the end to take any questions from the chat. So please feel free to ask away. We will also have some of the core developers on Flow on hand to support with any technical and Flow specific questions. So Max, can you give our listeners a brief introduction of yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Max. I'm a game designer from Germany. And yeah, thanks. I've been basically in the gaming industry since 2011. I've just started working with Flow, I think 7 months ago. That was like the first time I started with Flow, and we're basically an established gaming studio, which is B-Side Games. And we decided a long time ago, actually 3 years ago, to make a game which is exactly as our of the games we played when we were younger, like Legend of Zelda, like Pokemon, and all the good retro style games. And we decided to make a game that utilizes blockchain technology and has a big emphasis on good old gameplay. So, well, I myself, I used to work at different various studios in Germany. The biggest one is probably King Art Games. Back then we made like adventure games, point and click adventure games. Some people might remember those games from 20 years ago or 10 years ago. They were like kind of niche, but they had their specific audience. And I think it's actually the same thing with blockchain. Blockchain is currently niche, but this niche is basically going to evolve into a mainstream standard. And this is why blockchain itself is pretty exciting for us. And in this webinar, you will hopefully learn.
You first got into gaming.
So yeah, I was basically attending university here in Germany for a few years, but I never felt that university was specifically made for me. I was always more like the practical guy who wanted to try out new stuff, who wanted to actually practice coding. And in university, that was more like theory all of the time. You didn't really do or achieve anything. The few classes I actually took in university were related to cryptography, so which is kind of related to blockchain. But the thing is, before I joined university, I was actually working at King Art Games, so I knew the real world of being a game developer. So that's why the university courses and the university itself was a little bit, it wasn't satisfying enough. Yeah, I think today I have a few friends back in university, and they're actually now teaching blockchain related courses. So I think if someone is interested in joining university, they can now expect a little bit more to learn more about blockchain there as well, I think.
That's awesome. And what inspired you to create your own game studio back in 2017?
So B-Side Games has been founded in 2017 after we've been working on our first indie self-published commercial game, which is 321, which is available on Steam. If anyone wants to check it out, it's available for free. And we were basically a collective of independent game designers, artists, and creators, basically. And we wanted to have a legal cooperation to distribute and to publish our games. And since I was pretty much, since I always wanted to have my own company, I wanted to be where all of my people that I admire basically are, which are mostly independent game developers consisting of like 2 or 3 people. Now we're actually bigger than that, but back in the day, I was thinking about like a small independent team with like just a few people and being this collective, connecting our forces and making the best out of it. That's basically the reason why we went all the way and founded our own game studio, which was to provide us with a legal entity to publish our games.
That's fantastic. And can you talk to us more about Chainmonsters? So the upcoming online multiplayer RPG. What do we need to know about it?
Yeah. So Chainmonsters is basically a massively online role-playing game, which is based around, as I mentioned earlier, core game mechanics taken from The Legend of Zelda, Pokemon, and other games that we played back in the days when we were kids and younger. It's basically a monster catching game that is now connected to blockchain, where you basically have to explore a whole world filled with monsters, where you have to compete with other players and NPCs, obviously, as part of the story. And you basically try to find out a big mystery, which we haven't announced yet, probably, but we will talk more about story-related stuff in the upcoming weeks. But yeah, pretty much you play in this huge, massive world with players from all around the world together. We've been basically building our server architecture and our whole network and infrastructure over the past 3 years. And now we're basically at a point where we want to make the game available to everyone, and for that we are starting with Flow. We have a demo available on Steam, which is not well. It's a demo that is not really showcasing the game how it will be, but it was used as a stress test back in January, and you can play it for free and test it out, and you can get like a first glimpse of how things are supposed to work. But we're pretty much going to put some more info related to that out there at a later point. I guess what you should really know about Chainmonsters is it's a retro style 2D game. You catch monsters, you use them to fight against other people and NPCs and stuff. And most importantly, and that's pretty much why we're so excited at the moment, every single monster, every single item, and everything you progress throughout the story is basically saved as a token on the Flow blockchain. So once you have acquired a certain progress, a certain item, or once you've been super lucky, for example, and participate in a raid, and you found a super rare item, now it's one of the first. It is pretty much the first time in the history of gaming where you can, well, take that item. You can either use it for yourself, or you can trade it on a marketplace, for example, with other players. When you were playing traditional games in the past, like Diablo, for example, you spend hours and days grinding for a very specific item, and back then your options were limited. You had to keep it for yourself. But now, if you at some point decide to stop playing the game, for example, if you want to actually get something back, basically for your spent time, then you can turn that into a small profit. So you get that item, put it on the marketplace, and that's it.
That's amazing. I'm very interested and excited to play Chainmonsters when it releases. Could you talk more about the mission of B-Side Games, and are there any exciting details on the roadmap you're able to share with us?
Yeah, so basically, when I launched B-Side Games in 2017, my mission and our mission as the whole team and collective was basically to create unique and exciting experiences in the form of games, but also videos and stuff. This has now shifted over the last 3 years, specifically during the development of Chainmonsters, because while we are still aiming to provide interesting experiences, we have also noticed that there's a big payoff for basically exploring new and exciting technologies. And blockchain technology is basically what has shifted our focus a little bit, and it has actually added more value to the games itself. Sorry, what was the question again? Oh, our mission, right? The mission, yeah. So that's what we are basically take as our mission, to create interesting experiences available for everyone. I mean, the games we develop are pretty much free to play, so you don't need to spend any money to play the game. You can play weeks and even years if you want without spending a single cent. And if you so that's basically making it available for everyone with the lowest possible entry point. We are focusing on pretty much all the mechanics and gameplay elements we loved when we played the games that inspired us. So we are pretty much focused on a very traditional but stable stable game mechanics to make the most fun out of it, basically. And last but not least, we basically hope that we can kind of be part of the biggest change in the history of gaming. I mean, I personally think that the way blockchain works and interacts with not only games but basically apps will drastically change the way developers, players, and everyone else thinks about this kind of medium. Right? I mean, when we remember back in 2017 when CryptoKitties came along, which most of you might be familiar with, it basically completely shifted the way we think about digital assets. And now with Chainmonsters, we basically take a traditional game with proven game mechanics, with traditional scalable multiplayer experiences, and connect it with digital collectibles that not only work inside of Chainmonsters, but can also be used or utilized by basically anyone else on the network. So if someone would like to make like a third-party marketplace, if someone would like to build like a mini game experience, they can basically do that. Take the official assets. We are going to release an official statement and letter which details that you are allowed to use our assets, our graphics, and everything else basically to build experiences around the game. And I mean, if you as part of the community are basically building something that empowers the whole ecosystem, then I think that's a good thing for everyone. And yeah, I guess that's my answer.
Amazing. Yeah, that's very aligned with the mission at Flow as well. I will be now passing over to Piara, who will be covering the more blockchain related questions.
Hi, Max. Thanks for sharing your personal journey with us. I'm going to be covering some blockchain related questions, as Adrian mentioned. So if you don't mind, can you start off by telling us how you were first introduced to blockchain?
That's a pretty interesting story, because back then at King Art Games, I think in 2013, 2014, I was basically reading stories about Bitcoin and Litecoin and like all of those basic blockchain related assets. And I, because I was like always like a technical curious person, I was just interested in trying to mine on like a GPU and stuff back in the days. Just for like trying out how this whole thing works, how the decentralization is supported. And then I think I just let it rest, and I just took notice, read some news a few years, and then in 2016 and 2017, things really started to take off for me personally, because some of my friends were basically using blockchain related assets as an investment instrument. They were just like putting their money into ICOs and stuff. I was never participating in there, but they were like talking about it all the time. And so when at some point one of my best friends actually came to me, we were part of the same university classes, and he told me, hey, there's basically something new which is called Ethereum, and it's not a traditional blockchain. You can actually program on it, so you can run code on a decentralized computer, pretty much. and this is when I got really interested into the whole blockchain space again. And I started off with a few trading bots for my friends, basically, just to learn the language, to learn the ecosystem. I mean, 2016, 2017, as an Ethereum developer, felt a little bit like archaeology. You basically were digging into the code, into thousands of different code bases, trying to make a simple decentralized app work on your browser. It was really something, I guess. And then the biggest impact, and probably for me at least, was when, well, someone launched CryptoKitties in 2017. And 2017 had a very specific impact on me myself, because we had just been releasing our latest game on Steam. So we were basically in a phase where we were looking for a new project. We were playing around with ideas. We were designing and just trying funny things to come up with a new game. And then I was thinking, wait a minute, okay, so another coincidence was that back then there was like an SDK developed for C#, which enabled me to interact from my game engine to the Ethereum blockchain. So that was a big help, obviously back then. So I thought, maybe we should give this a try. And one of our biggest ideas has always been making a Pokemon and Zelda inspired game, but just put like our own ideas, our own concepts, and especially multiplayer into this whole system. And I said, well, maybe we can just make like a small demo, maybe integrate this blockchain thing and see how it goes. And yeah, that was basically the very beginning of Chainmonsters, when we had like a very small demo available in your web browser, which you were able to play and use. You were retrieving and sending events through MetaMask, I believe, whenever you made like some smaller changes. And it worked. And it basically, yeah, enabled everything we've been doing in the last 3 years since then.
Sure. No, I think we've come a long way from those ICO days. And could you talk to us a bit more about kind of your experience building games on Ethereum quite early on? I know you briefly touched on it, but what were kind of the challenges building a game on Ethereum, and now kind of what's attracted you to partner with Flow?
So I've so my biggest struggle has always been that while me and my team have always been making games, we've never really made websites. I mean, if it's basically a totally different story. I mean, you can be a programmer, you can learn new languages, but you want to focus on what you can best. And to make Ethereum, and especially in the early days, the demo work with Chainmonsters playable in your browser, you need to have like a website. You needed to have Web3 JS, which is basically one of the most horrible codes and pieces of software I've ever come across. I mean, they've done a great job over the years, but back in the days, it was a hassle. So basically, software compatibility, not only between the game, the browser, and the blockchain was an issue, but also just the available tools back at the time where we were not production ready. And this has only been made available over the recent years, but back then it was really like hacking something together to make it work. And I can't remember how much time we actually spent in the last 2 days before our demo launch back then, just to make the connection between MetaMask and the browser work. So it was a different time. It was the early days, pretty much. But yeah, I'm glad that now, even on Ethereum, the tools have now shifted. They're way better than 3 years ago, and things are more stable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And keeping the blockchain technology in mind, how do you see the evolution of gaming in the future?
So it's this is a very, very interesting question, because I've basically received the same one 2 years ago. And 2 years ago, I had a pretty traditional and less excited point of view of how gaming is probably going to change, or how blockchain is probably going to change gaming, because I had the impression if the existing technology, I mean, in theory, the existing technology would enable the Electronic Arts, Ubisoft, all the big ones to create like a similar system without blockchain in mind in the first place. So back then, my answer was, well, I don't think blockchain will revolutionize gaming as much as people think it will. That was basically my old answer. But today, I would say, well, we have actually seen a shift in how game developers and also big publishers are basically thinking about blockchain, how they're treating blockchain, and how they're looking at current and future solutions. I mean, the best example is pretty much Ubisoft. I mean, they just launched their Rabbids NFTs yesterday, which no one would have ever expected like 3 years ago. I mean, people were talking about the possibility, but actually doing it and showcasing to everyone else, yeah, we are invested in blockchain technology, that's like a different story. Also, I mean, back then when I was asked the same question, I was not convinced that there will be a scalable solution anytime soon. And this is where I remained to be right, up to a certain point, obviously. Yeah, it's. I'm still questioning if at some point you will see a Nintendo-based character inside an Electronic Arts game, for example. But what we can see and what we can tell right now is that no matter how big or how small or big the developers are, that everyone who has been in touch with the technology itself by now is pretty excited, and this enables a lot of cross-platform and cross-game compatibility in the near future. I mean, we are pretty much saying, okay, we would like to go all in on this technology. We would like to start an experiment. We make everything available to anyone through a free API. So as I said before, if you make a game, if you make an experience on top of the Chainmonsters brand, for example, go for it, monetize it, as long as it, I mean, and we even would like to feature you, obviously, if it's not like if it's not against like certain rules, obviously. But I think this kind of model is going to expand, and now with more scalable solutions, including Flow, obviously, I think things are truly going to take off very soon.
Sure, absolutely. And in terms of blockchain and Chainmonsters, why is blockchain really integral to Chainmonsters' success? And what's the role of digital assets in Chainmonsters?
So Chainmonsters is basically, I mean, the name itself is probably deeply connected to some sort of you are thrown into this world, and you can get items, you can get specific progress, you get and train and battle with Chainmons along the way. And instead of having a traditional in-game trading system, we are aiming to have everything running. Everything that is related to digital assets is basically put on chain, which has not been possible before. I mean, we just to give some numbers, we've been making a very intense gameplay test last year, where we had like 500,000, I think 497K, I think, matches in like a month or two. And that's just like with a very limited amount of players. So this amount of traffic would have pretty much killed traditional blockchains. especially if there's more than one app running on it. But the idea of Chainmonsters is pretty much everything you earn in the game, no matter if it's an item, if it's a Chainmon you catch, or for example, if there's like a seasonal reward you receive in game, everything is tokenized. So if you are one of the earliest adopters, if you are one of the earliest players venturing into this world, you are able to gain access to items and other tokens, pretty much that are not obtainable at a later point in time. And we are now currently building a character customization system where you can now fully customize the character. So when we have a new season, when new gameplay content drops, those drops are only available during that season. So if you are playing during the first season or during the development pre-season, you get items, cosmetics, everything. And if a player joins the game at a later point in time, for example, in a year or so, they have no way to obtain that item without going through the player-driven marketplace. And this is one of the core features in how we integrate blockchain into the system. We want to push a player-driven economy to its limits. So once those items have made available, have been achieved in game, they're completely in the hands of the players, and they can do whatever they want, pretty much.
Sure, and just on that point as well, for more so the traditional players with no blockchain experience or little blockchain experience, how easy is it going to be for them to play Chainmonsters?
This has been working previously already. I mean, people have been testing it on those devices, but now with Flow, we have actually taken advantage of the server-based SDK. So instead of having to our game servers and our backend, so whenever a new player joins the game, they're pretty much clicking just the play button on Steam, and in the background there will be an account created for them. So they don't even have to enter their email address to play. They also are granted an Flow account in the background, which they can claim whenever they want. So for new players or players who have never heard of blockchain before, who have no blockchain experience, they basically just play the game like any other game from a traditional point of view. They have fun, and through our in-game marketplace, they can already start accumulating tokens. They can already start access to their accounts, and this is something that is pretty much unique to the Flow ecosystem, which we were trying to code ourselves in the past, but it's taking it took so much time. It's a necessity to be successful, because otherwise you will never be able to mix the blockchain experience with a traditional game.
Yeah, no, that sounds very seamless. And how do you plan on driving mainstream adoption for Chainmonsters?
So the funny thing is, when during the last when we had this huge public test last year, we were not marketing the game to anyone. We were just saying, here's our Discord server, here's the game, here's a Steam key to download the game, or here's the iOS and Android link to play it on mobile. Just go for it. We would like to test our servers, have fun. And for some reason, we might have hit a very special and unique spot with this kind of game experience, because all of a sudden, we basically saw our daily active users double every few days. We saw a lot of coverage on Twitch and on DLive, which is like another blockchain-related streaming service. And so the community was really the biggest and the biggest driver of user acquisition during that time, because we didn't have any marketing budget. We were just saying, hey, we would like to test the server, okay? We would like to get some early feedback for the demo. And I mean, this kind of monster catching RPG is like a pretty engaging and pretty rewarding game experience on its own. Getting in tackling this kind of market that has been dominated by Nintendo for 20 years is a challenge. But we also saw that people, they want to see a change. We saw like we have our whole development process pretty much completely transparent. And I think the community engagement between us developers with the community, but also the community with each other through streams and through word of mouth, pretty much, is one of the key factors in our success. And we have been a little bit silent during the last few months of development, but that's pretty much because we have completely redesigned the game. We have onboarded new developers, so it was a lot of stuff to set up. And I mean, I'm pretty hyped about creating new YouTube videos explaining the game to a new audience, because while the game audience has been growing over 3 years, we are now basically we need to explain the game to the player again, just because so much has changed since the last time they've played it, pretty much. And this is what we're going to do moving forward.
Sure. And do you have any advice that you can share with aspiring and independent game developers who want to develop on the blockchain? Are there any pitfalls to avoid?
Yes. So the blockchain audience is an audience that is really can really be into your project. So if you hit like the perfect spot with an idea, with like a project, with like a game or whatever you are building, pretty much, then you will find a pretty engaged and excited community. But that can also backfire. So if you're not honest, I mean, not only blockchain itself is transparent, also everything you say is now transparent. So this has been true for traditional game development over the last few years as well, but it's more so on blockchain, where every single transaction, where every single word you say is put onto a specific it's like a specific weight to it. So that's why we're now a little bit more careful in promising stuff. I mean, we're not promising anything. We're basically saying, well, once the game is ready, you will be able to play it. But we're not going to promise like a release date or anything, because we know it's pretty much impossible to to see that far into the future, or actually aim for something at the moment. I think if you want to make a game on the blockchain, if you want to connect blockchain digital assets within your game, then I think the most optimal thing to do right now is to start something small and focus on interoperability. Because one thing we've seen with CryptoKitties is one of the best examples of that is actually CryptoKitties itself had like pretty limited game mechanics, just breeding and collecting. But then you had the community take over the project dynamically and organically. So we've seen various experiments and experiences where you all of a sudden turned CryptoKitties into a racing game, for example, or anything. So as long as you are supporting interoperability in some ways, you have a chance that the community is so attached to your assets that they take it to the next level. So I think that's probably the best advice. Focus on interoperability, and potentially, if there's already an existing big project on the blockchain that is active, then you can actually see if there are like some ways to connect the other project into your project by making use of the interoperability by yourself. We have seen a trading card game on Ethereum a few months ago, where someone was basically taking assets from all of the big Ethereum-based games, and connected them to their own proprietary a trading card game where you basically were able to battle with each other. And this has been pretty successful, I believe. So look at your ecosystem. If you are developing on Flow, for example, there's some pretty exciting projects launching. Check it out and see if you can potentially make use of the existing ecosystem, the existing projects. And if not, if you want to do something else, focus on interoperability, make your assets available to everyone, and make sure it's based on a legal basis, so that you don't have to answer thousands of questions if someone would like to use your assets pretty much in their projects.
Sure, thank you so much for that, Max. I'm sure many will take heed to that. And fast forwarding to the future a little bit, we're aware that you've got a background in VR. Can you think of any potential crossovers with VR and blockchain gaming? Could this be something that Chainmonsters might consider in the future?
So virtual reality is something that I've been touching in the past through a few projects I developed during university. I think VR is currently in a phase where it's a little bit, it's basically waiting for a little bit of a change. So like we have the PlayStation VR version, which has like actually it's a substantial amount of PlayStation owners which have a VR device, but on PC it's like a very small percentage of players. What I see for VR specifically as like one of my visions I would have myself for VR is pretty much have big physical venues filled with VR content, and that VR content could actually be distributed and implemented through NFT tokens. So we have a Decentraland, for example, on Ethereum. Something like this, but in VR and in a physical place, could be something where people could make a business model out of it, have sponsorships in VR and connect that to a decentralized governance contract. I mean, there are like all sorts of possibilities. I mean, VR is just one small part of technology and gaming and etc. So like in Chainmonsters, there are no specific plans for any virtual reality implementations. What we might do in the future is pretty much provide some example projects for the community where they can use it as a starter point pretty much to integrate existing Chainmonsters assets with like all the APIs and all the content they need, and yeah, use that to kickstart their own project which integrates with Chainmonsters assets, and that could also be available in VR.
Sure, that's great to hear. And I believe that brings me to the end of my questions. So I'm going to now pass it back over to Adrian, who I think is going to go through the Q&A part.
Thank you both for the insightful discussions. Yep, as Piara mentioned, we have some questions from the audience. So the first one is from Max. I think you alluded to this already, Max, but the question...
We'll have a wallet connected, an anonymous wallet connected through the SDK. And in the future, you can also have like your own external Flow wallet, for example, or whatever wallet provider you're using. And then you can either transfer your assets, because on Flow, everything is a public resource, so we don't actually control where you move your assets. And we will have different ways to import or connect wallets, even if you are changing it throughout the game or your playthrough. But yeah, so basically every new player has a separate wallet generated for them once they play the game for the first time.
That's great. So the next question is from Matthew. What determines the value of the items, i.e. will they be fixed or will they be linked to value in the volatility of the Flow token when the Flow token becomes available?
So when the game is actually launched and you are actually earning items through playing or doing specific actions in game, then the items itself will just be based on the current market situation. Like if we are only like if we launch and there are only 1,000 players, for example, and then you find like one of the rarest items in the game, then you are technically the only person in the world that owns this particular item, and then it's basically the job of the community or the players itself to figure out what's that worth it. I mean, to take that back to CryptoKitties, when CryptoKitties launched, one of the earliest kitties was sold for like 200,000 or something. I'm not entirely sure anymore. But basically, that was not decided by Dapper Labs or by you guys. Basically, that was decided by someone from the community who said, well, I'm willing to pay that much for that specific kitten or kitty, and that's the same way how the player-driven economy works in Chainmonsters. Nothing is set in stone by us. We are only providing the game experience and generating specific items throughout the gameplay. And if it takes you 100 hours to get to a very specific item late in the game, then I would believe that this specific item or this specific Chainmon or this specific subset of abilities that Chainmon has can have some value. And that's how the player-driven economy kind of works.
Sure. And one of the last questions we have is from Max. So the monsters will be in form of random encounters. For example, in Final Fantasy, Pokemon, or even World of Warcraft, you can find specific enemies almost at the exact location if you know where to look for them. Will this become a challenge of farming or perhaps reducing the value of specific items or monsters? Were you considering this? And if so, how are you looking to solve this?
So the most, if not 99% of all monsters will be obtainable in the way of random encounters, similar to how you know it from, for example, Pokemon or Final Fantasy. The way it works is you can potentially or in theory farm a specific monster. There are like lots of randomized values and settings pretty much determining where a specific monster spawns. So we have like an ice or a lava region where only specific kinds of chain monsters can spawn. But pretty much we're currently considering implementing an anti-farming anti-farming farming mechanic into the game. But in general, you can in theory be at a specific position in the world and look for one specific monster for 100 hours or something, and then you can get it at some point. But I mean, that's pretty much how this whole system works. If you are willing to spend the time, and which is pretty much the gameplay thing of one of those free-to-play titles, if you're willing to spend the time, then you can achieve your goals. But everything comes at a cost. If it's either time or the money you spend on the player-driven marketplace, it's basically your decision. And but as I see what you mean, we are pretty much having anti-botting and anti-hacking mechanisms in the game.
Thank you. And the last question we have for today is from Gabriel. He has asked, so the question is there going to be a Kickstarter, and is this something you had in plan?
Yeah. So one of our so previously we were talking about making a Kickstarter, and a Kickstarter is still in store for Chainmonsters. We have over the last few months we've decided to split it up a little bit. We're going to start with a pre-sale on Flow, which is focused on some. There will be a blog post very soon, I promise. There will be a pre-sale on Flow very soon, and then there will be a Kickstarter which is used to which is not limited. So the Flow pre-sale is limited in quantity, limited in and people that can participate. It's focused on the digital items on chain only. The Kickstarter, on the other hand, is focused on the physical items. So we have already created some physical plushies for the game, for Chainmonsters specifically already, and we are currently making some demo stuff for physical, like for the physical game edition and stuff. We're going to play around with some merchandise, and the Kickstarter edition, or the Kickstarter itself, is pretty much focused on physical rewards. And this is where we start targeting and doing lots of marketing for the traditional non-blockchain audience. So we're kind of dividing the whole financing aspect of Chainmonsters between a digital-only pre-sale on Flow and then a physical-only Kickstarter campaign in the second half of 2020.
That's super exciting. Thank you once again, Max. I think that's the end of the questions today, and we really appreciate your time. But before we wrap up, where can everyone keep up to date with the latest developments at B-Side Games?
So we so it's either bsidegames.com, where you can just take a look at all of our games and where you can find more info about Chainmonsters, or you can just go to our newly launched website, playchainmonsters.com. I'll just write in the chat, and there you can join our Discord where we are most active. And if you are very curious about the game, we have just unlocked our internal demo version we used back in January for our stress test. You can download it on Steam if you want to check it out, but it's an older version, but you can still try it if you want.
And if anyone wanted to build on top of Chainmonsters, what is the best way to reach out?
Oh, if they want to build on top of Chainmonsters?
That's right.
Oh, I see. So you can just shoot me either like myself an email or a message on Discord. I'm part of the Flow developer Discord, so and we'll be asking some questions there as well once we are overhauling our smart contracts, or just join our Chainmonsters Discord. I'm pretty much the one which is sitting right at the top on the right side.
That's fantastic. I'm looking forward to it. Lastly, if anyone would like to learn more about Flow and the upcoming webinar series we have, please join our Discord, socials, and our website, which is onflow.org. Thank you for joining, and have a great day, everyone.